One of the top Nazi officials was Reinhard Heydrich. He was in charge of repressions in Czechoslovakia. He was in charge of the murders, one of the planners of the Holocaust, and the extermination drives. His murder was intended to serve as a statement against the Nazi occupation by the Czechoslovak intelligence service. For the benefit of governments or organizations, they gather and analyze sensitive information. They carry out covert operations, infiltration, and other forms of surveillance to obtain information about prospective threats or to their advantage. Because of the often secretive nature of their employment, it calls for extreme discretion and professionalism. They could work covertly or assume different identities. They need a high level of skill, training, and mental toughness for their work, which can be dangerous. Their practice frequently involves emotional deceit and manipulation. A signing of the Munich Treaty took place on September 30, 1938. This agreement was signed by Nazi Germany, the United Kingdom, France, and Italy. This agreement was a compromise with the Nazi government in Germany over Sudety, a region on the German-Czech border that was influenced by the Czech Republic, and that Adolf Hitler had threatened to annex by force. It appears that the goal of the European leaders of the moment was to prevent a terrible conflict. Historically, this region was a part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which vanished after the First World War. This German-speaking territory was ceded to the Czechoslovak Republic, which was established after the First World War, in accordance with the Versailles Treaty of 1919. War in Europe was not avoided by the Munich Pact. Austria was formally incorporated into Nazi Germany's borders as part of the Anschluss in 1938. While the Czechoslovaks continued to view Germany's annexation of the Sudety as an occupation, the Austrians welcomed the annexation. The Germans referred to this region as Sudetenland. The invasion and destruction of Czechoslovakia became the leader of Nazi Germany's primary objective. Following the acquisition of Austria, German forces invaded the remaining portion of Czechoslovakia, known by Hitler as the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia from Prague Castle, on the 15th day of 1939, beginning at the Sudety. Negotiations with Emil Acha, who technically kept his position as head of state, led to this outcome. The Germans, who served the Reich where Hitler was the representative, had real power. Racial disparities developed in the recently formed nation of Czechoslovakia, as a result of the Nazi occupation. There was intense animosity for the Nazis, and the environment was set for ferocious resistance. The Nazis were moving toward the most brutal kind of oppression. Other men were also dispatched to Czechoslovakia. And among them, Reinhard Heydrich, who is regarded as one of the Holocaust's architects, was the most well-known. Before becoming the Deputy Protector of Bohemia and Moravia, which is now a part of the Czech Republic, Reinhard Heydrich held a number of positions. On March 7, 1904, Reinhard Heydrich was born in Halle, Germany's Saale region. He was a product of the bourgeoisie medium, like the majority of his generation. Reinhard Heydrich was raised in a strict and disciplined environment. He was raised in a nationalist setting. His animosity toward the Catholic Church became apparent once his personality's characteristics were complete. He had a tendency to share Heinrich Himmler's viewpoints, who was one of Adolf Hitler's fiercest and most powerful individuals. He oversaw the extermination efforts at the death camps and oversaw the German secret police, known as the Gestapo, under his leadership. Himmler was the most deadly Nazi because he had spies and eyes everywhere who brought him news and information. He has the power to punish any party opponents or those who have been charged with being anti-party. In 1936, there was a race for posts and an attempt to seize the reins of power. Because Adolf Hitler was poised to take office. Hitler referred to Reinhard Heydrich as the man with a steel heart. He was getting directives and commands from Hitler, Himmler, and Hermann Göring, the creator of the Gestapo secret police, during the war years. He was in charge during the horrific Kristallnacht of November 9 to 10, 1938. It was known as Kristallnacht because there was so much broken glass that night. 91 Jews were murdered that evening, while more than 30,000 more were sent to detention camps. Heydrich was sent to Czechoslovakia by Adolf Hitler, who thought they would be soon routed. Heydrich came up with a strategy to eradicate all forms of opposition throughout Czechoslovakia. Heydrich also imposed martial law on September 29, 1941, restricting freedoms and applying pressure to the populace. This meant that food rations were distributed to individuals based on how well behaved the Czech people were. The Prime Minister of the Protection Authority was soon detained by Reinhard Heydrich. Other Czech officials who had been tried and found guilty of resistance crimes were executed, alongside hundreds of other intellectuals who had been mass murdered after being deported to prison camps. From London, the Czechoslovak government, which was in place at the time of the German invasion, was closely monitoring Heydrich and his men's actions and started making preparations for an attack with the aid of companions. Yet, Britain, one of the few European countries that were not occupied by the Nazis, expressed its worry that they may invade. The Allies made the decision to launch the Czechoslovak Army of Liberation with 450 members, in response to the ambitions of the Czechoslovak government. For training, they were brought to London. Heydrich was pleased that repressions and murders had quieted the public scene in Czechoslovakia. Driving in an open vehicle was him. That provoked Czechoslovakians. Hitler's highest-ranking official, in Czechoslovakia, was the target of the assassination carried out with the most instigation. The contract was executed. We want Reinhard Heydrich.
Heydrich must die.
On October 20, 1941, preparations got underway, and the 20 people chosen for the mission were chosen by hand by the head of Czech intelligence. They were dispatched to Scotland, where the British States Commando training facility is located. Josef Gabčík, a non-commissioned officer from Slovakia, and Karl Svoboda, a sergeant from the Czech Republic, were the next two officers picked. Although it was decided that the procedure would take place on October 20th, the date was changed due to Sergeant Svoboda's head injury. They changed Svoboda through another Czech commander named Jan Kubiš. A landing operation was conducted during the night of December 28 to 29, 1941. The takedown of the Operation Anthropoid crew is completed. They were supposed to land in Pilsen, about 90 kilometers, 56 miles, west of Prague, but a navigational error caused them to land in the eastern part of Prague. They must travel to Prague to carry out the assassination. Josef Gabčík and Jan Kubiš mooted the idea of ambushing and killing him on a train, but abandoned that idea. According to the second plan, he will be assassinated in Prague, not outside. Then came the known day, May 27, 1942. It is now 10:30 a.m. Reinhard Heydrich was traveling to his workplace from his home. Josef Gabčík and Jan Kubiš, paratroopers with the Czechoslovak intelligence, were waiting at a tram stop near the entrance to Pavlovka Hospital. When the car approached where the two paratroopers were standing, Gabčík pounced and stood in its way. When he wanted to shoot Heydrich, his submachine gun jammed. Heydrich asked his driver to shoot. At that moment, Jan Kubiš threw a hand grenade at the car. The bomb fell outside the car, but its fragments wounded Heydrich. It had turbulent moments. Jan got hit by shrapnel from the bomb. As they tried to flee, Heydrich tried to catch up with them. He had not yet felt his wounds, as after a few steps, he fell and collapsed, while Jan Kubiš and Gabčík disappeared, and the regiment supporting them withdrew. Heydrich did not die at the time, but a week later, he succumbed to blood poisoning.